imprisoned. These are innocent kids. Why would you keep them with their parents in prison? Okay, so the left sort of wants it both ways. They don't want you to be able to keep the kids in prison with the parents, but they also don't want you to separate the parents from the kids, which leaves only one solution, of course, which is release the parents, which is really what they want out of this entire thing. Now, how do I know that this is what they want from the entire spiel here? Well, because while the Democrats are out there saying Nazi, 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 Nazi about all of this policy, and let's be real, I did not see that coming. While they're saying all of this about Nazi policy from the right is actually attempting to solve this. So Republicans came forward yesterday. Ted Cruz came forward yesterday with a bill that would fix all of this and say that children can stay with their parents in detention centers until all of the proceedings have gone forward. So what did Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer do? He dismissed the legislative proposal. He said there are so many obstacles to legislation, and when the president can do it with his own pen, it makes no sense. Legislation is not the way to go here when it's so easy for the president to sign it. And then asked if that meant Democrats would not support a bill backed by Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell to keep immigrant families together while seeking asylum on the U.S. border. Schumer said they want to keep the focus on Trump. Again, quote, the president can change it with his pen. Unacceptable additions have bogged down every piece of legislation we've done. So in other words, it's Nazi policy, but if the Republicans try to fix it, they're also Nazis, which is pretty convenient for the Democrats. And as I said, the media coverage of this particular issue has led Democrats to believe that the issue doesn't need to be solved. It instead should be used as a club to wield against everybody that you don't like. This is the plan by people like Chuck Schumer on the left. You can't have it both ways. Either the policy is straight from Japanese internment camps in Nazi Germany, in which case you should be for anything that would alleviate the policy, or the policy is not that bad, in which case maybe we should argue over the policy. But the Democrats want to say that the policy is awful, it's evil, it's Nazi-esque, it's Japanese internment in 1942. It's all of those things, but we're not going to work to solve it because it's all on Trump. Okay, all of which suggests that a lot of the Democratic tears on this are crocodile tears for political gain. Now, I'm not going to say that everybody who's upset over this policy is faking it, because I don't think that's right. I think a lot of people are upset over this policy. Listen, I don't think it's a great policy. I think it's a bad policy. But I also think that keeping kids interned with parents is not a great policy either. There is no great policy when it comes to illegal immigration. In the end, as with war games, the only winning move is not to play. Right? If you don't want illegal immigrants separated from their families or alternatively kept with their families in detention, don't illegally immigrate. You're going to have to deter illegal immigration. That is the only solution because, again, you can't say that you want kids to stay with the families, but you also want kids released. It's either one or the other. You can't have it both ways. But it seems that the left is more interested in promulgating a particular feeling about this policy than they are about solving it. It's just like gun control. Every time there's a mass shooting, the left decides that it's necessary to have these vast displays of emotion, these vast displays of empathy, and then they don't actually get anything done because the policies they call for have nothing to do with actually stopping the crime at issue. Well, the same thing is happening here. The Republicans have proposed a legislative fix. The Democrats are running away from that legislative fix. Now they're urging President Trump to go ahead and make an executive decision to simply overrule the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals decision in Flores and keep the kids together with their parents. How long do you think it will take for another lawsuit to be filed saying that it's unconstitutional for the kids to remain together with their parents or that it is a violation of the 1997 Flores agreement with the federal government? It'll take exactly 5 seconds because we just had those lawsuits. Again, the Obama administration kept children with parents. They were sued not to do that. They changed their policy. Not only did they change their policy, they had said that they were keeping the kids together with their parents as a deterrent. And the court said you're not allowed to do that. And now they're saying you can't release the kids. So you can't keep the kids and you can't release the kids because all the left really wants is everyone released. Well, all the emotion that's coming out from this is on one level understandable, on another level irritating if you're not going to propose any solution. So Rachael Maddow last night on MSNBC, she broke down on air talking about migrant babies being detained. Now, look, nobody is happy with the idea of 12-month-old babies. I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. No one likes the idea of a 2-year-old being removed from their parents and crying for mommy and daddy. Nobody likes this, which is why I've been saying legislative fix from literally the first day that this controversy broke onto the scene. But I will just point out that Rachael Maddow has no such sympathy for the hundreds of thousands of babies who are killed in the womb every year. She has no such sympathy for kids who are removed from their parents when parents are arrested for domestic crimes. Rachael Maddow seems to me to be using emotion as a sort of baton in order to try and drive a particular narrative. And that narrative, by the way, is not creating solutions. Again, that narrative is designed to let Democrats prevent solutions. That narrative is designed to allow Democrats to emotionally manipulate the American public without working to fix the problem in the first place. Here's Rachael Maddow / Michael Knowles last night.
Trump administration officials have been sending babies and other young children to at least three 3 tender age shelters in South Texas. Lawyers and medical providers just think I'm going to have to hand this off.
Okay, the tender age shelters, by the way, have existed since 2010 under the Obama administration. I'll say this, as somebody who covers the news every day, I'm not a big fan of histrionics on air. Again, I'm sure that this is legit from Rachael Maddow. Okay, I'm not going to say that I don't think that she feels this way. I'm sure she does feel this way. But all of us who are in the television business, all of us who are on camera on a regular basis, I would suggest that it is not a good look for us to get so emotional about issues that we can't discuss them rationally. Yeah, but emotional investment in issues actually prevents rational discussion of those issues. But I think the emotional investment is the entire point at this point. I think it's become all about feelings and very little about policy. For example, here's an NPR anchor. Her last name is Hinojosa, and she says that this is just like the Nazis. It's exactly like the Nazis on MSNBC.
Elie Wiesel, may he rest in peace, what he said to me was, he said, you know, the Nazis had it perfectly correct. They declared us an illegal people. That's how it began. We were declared an illegal people as Jews, right. And that follows that. And it's a very horrible thing to make these comparisons, but if you think about the level of dehumanization where we have arrived, where children are being taken, there's an art there.
Okay, no, there isn't. You're an idiot. You're an idiot. Okay, first, I would like to point out that everybody in America seems to have read Harry Potter and once heard of people called the Nazis, and every single issue must fit into one of these two frameworks, into these two idiotic frameworks. Either everything is a Harry Potter do-over, or everybody's a Nazi. Not everything you dislike is Nazi policy, gang. Read a fricking book. If you really believe that Nazi policy was to have a process of law whereby people who were illegally attempting to enter Nazi Germany were temporarily separated from their children for the protection of the children because we didn't want to hold the children in incarcerated custody, and then they were reunited with those children when people were deported, if you really think that was Nazi policy, it's because you're a moron. As far as the notion of dehumanization, it is not dehumanizing. The whole point here is that the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, the most liberal court in America, held that it is a better policy to force parents and children to be separated than to leave children with parents in custody in the first place. Again, this was not Trump coming up with, you know what would be a nefarious, evil idea if we took those kids away from those parents. That is an effectuation of law. Once you arrest people, the kids have to be removed by force of law. Now, it seems that today Trump wants to change that by executive order. We'll see if he's even allowed to get away with that. It'll go straight to court. It'll probably be overturned. Because in the end, there is really an agenda here. But it drives me nuts when people start invoking the Nazis when the policy that is being discussed has nothing to do with the Nazis. Nazi is not just shorthand for stuff I don't like. Crying Nazi is like crying wolf now. There are actual Nazis. Okay, there are actually people in the world who believe the same thing the Nazis did. The Iranian regime believes the same thing the Nazis did when it comes to extermination of the Jews. Okay, there are lots of people across the world who believe in Nazi-esque policy with regard to eugenic abortion, for example. There are lots of people across the world who believe Nazi-esque fiscal policy. But in order for you to make a comparison, you can't just say, look at that Trump. He probably has a swastika in his basement. The only thing separating Trump from Hitler is the mustache. You actually have to explain why the policy that you say you oppose is truly Nazi-esque. And to say that it's all about dehumanization, it's too vague. It's not about dehumanization. We're not saying that these people should be taken out and gassed. We're not saying people should be taken out and shot. I'm not happy with the treatment here. But to suggest that there is anything remotely resembling Nazi policy happening here is insulting to Americans. It's insulting to the Trump administration. They did. Because if anybody said the sort of inarticulate things that President Obama has said routinely when he's off teleprompter, they'd be raked over the coals for it. Job performance, right? They say there's discrimination in job performance, and this is white privilege, right? The fact is that Mizzou has affirmative action in its hiring processes. There are already laws on the books that bar discrimination based on race in hiring. There's already a federal Equal Employment Opportunity Commission that investigates charges of racism on a routine basis. It has a program. It's called E-Race, Eradicating Racism and Colorism in Employment. It's designed to fight discrimination against people of color. That is not white privilege. That is the government going out of its way to attempt to fight individual racists and, in some cases, go beyond the evidence in order to demonstrate racism. The idea that, especially on college campuses, that black folks on college campuses, people of color on college campuses are suffering from some unspecified white privilege, really talk to the Asian guy who has to score 230 points above the black guy in order to get in the same college before you tell me about white privilege. Okay, the fact is that affirmative action programs across the country, de facto and not de facto and in law as well, all of these programs are specifically created in order to get ethnic minority students with lower SAT scores into the building. Okay, if it's white privilege to sit on the side because you can't go to college because the black guy took your slot because he had a lower SAT score, and it didn't matter that he grew up rich and you grew up poor, right? If that's white privilege, then nobody would want to be a member of the white privileged class. Racial profiling and crime. This is the one that you hear the most often. Right? The police are out to get black folks. Without evidence, we keep hearing that white officers shoot black people for no reason whatsoever. This is absolute nonsense. More white people in the United States die at the hands of the cops than black people. More importantly, blacks are more likely to be killed by police than white people on a percentage basis, but police are less likely to kill black people in the same circumstances. According to Professor Peter Moskos of John Jay College of Criminal Justice at CUNY, City University of New York, quote, if one adjusts for the racial disparity in the homicide rate, or the rate at which police are feloniously killed, whites are actually more likely to be killed by police than blacks. In other words, if you take a look at the murder rate in the black community, which is significantly higher than the murder rate in the white community, and you use those statistics rather than just general population statistics, what you see is that the cops overrepresent in terms of the number of whites that they kill as opposed to blacks that they kill. How about racial profiling when it comes to speeding? Right? You get this one a lot. Driving while black. Well, if you remember back to the 1990s, there was a big hubbub. There was a settlement, actually, from the state of New Jersey, in which the state of New Jersey was accused of discriminating against black drivers. Right? Black drivers were saying that they were being pulled over for no apparent reason. Well, the Department of Justice and the New Jersey Attorney General commissioned a study, and they clocked the speed of all the drivers. Instead of just assuming that everybody drives at the same speed regardless of race, which, again, was an evidenceless proposition, they actually went ahead and they looked at how do people drive in the state of New Jersey. Turns out that black people sped disproportionately. Blacks were 25% of all the people speeding and 23% of all the people getting speeding tickets. Right? So the idea that just because there's a disproportionality that is evidence of racism, it's just not true. How about sentencing disparities? I mean, as long as we're myth-busting all of this, how about sentencing disparities? Right? There's this idea out there that black people and white people who commit the same crime, they go to jail for different periods of time. Particularly, people like to cite the disparity between crack and powder cocaine sentences. Okay, the fact is that the reason that there is a disparity between crack and powder cocaine sentences is because it is easier to distribute crack, and it is easier to sell crack, and it is easier for people to get high off of crack. And the people who are the moving forces behind the crack powder cocaine disparity were black legislators in inner cities who didn't want people selling crack cocaine in their communities. A majority of black legislators voted in favor of of disparities in terms of crack versus powder cocaine. As early as 1994, the Justice Department surveyed felony cases in the country's 75 largest urban areas. They found lower felony prosecution rates for blacks than for whites. Actually, the truth is that one of the biggest problems plaguing black communities right now is under-policing, not over-policing. It's not finding people who kill people and putting them in jail. It's not finding serious criminals and putting them in jail. There's a great book called Ghettocide by a very leftist journalist named Jill Levy. She talks specifically about this. She says that one of the things that is necessary if you want a better lifestyle in inner city black communities is more law enforcement. You need people to feel protected. The reason people aren't investing in Ferguson, Missouri has nothing to do with racism and everything to do with the fact they don't want to have their store burned down. If you're worried about the property crime rates in an area, you're not going to invest in that area. You want to build up those areas. You need more cops, not less, so stop bashing the cops. Okay, poverty. And the idea is that blacks in America are more impoverished than whites because of systemic racism. Okay, according to the Brookings Institute, which is a very left institute, the Brookings Institute has found that if you want to not be permanently poor in the United States, it's actually very easy. This is a wonderful country. If you don't want to be permanently poor in the United States, you need to do three things. Finish high school, get a job, don't get pregnant before you get married. That's it. Seriously, if you do those three things, you will not be permanently poor in the United States. Would you like to know why there's a disproportionate poverty rate in the black community? Because there is a disproportionate single motherhood rate and dropout rate in the black community. Okay, as much as we can talk about white privilege, the fact is that the single motherhood rate in the black community in 1960 was 20%. Today, it is upward of 70%. Unless you are going to argue that racism in the United States has more than tripled in the same period of time that the civil rights movement had its great successes, this is nonsense. And again, there's not a white person anywhere that is forcing a black person to sleep with a black person, conceive a child, and then not get married. It's not happening. It is not. There's not a single place this is happening anywhere in the United States. People, and this is true for by the way, white people who are lower. It's true across races. It's not just a race-specific thing. Poor white people are people who are having kids out of wedlock and not finishing high school and not getting a job. Right? It's true for everyone. The fact that it's disproportionate in the black community doesn't mean that whites are racist. It means that something needs to change inside the black community, and people need to start taking personal responsibility. I know these words are out of style. Personal responsibility for the stuff that you do. It is your life. Make something of it. So, here's the deal with white privilege. Because white